The moment I realized our HOA president had hired a fake police force, complete with K-9 units, to terrorize residents, a chilling fear gripped me. I knew I had to act fast before someone got seriously hurt. But I never, in my wildest dreams, anticipated that my own father, Police Chief Anderson, would unearth a web of corruption so intricate it would shake our entire community to its very core. What would you do if you discovered the people claiming to protect your neighborhood were actually criminals hiding behind badges? Welcome to my channel. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. It all started innocently enough. A bright orange paper, fluttering ominously on my front door, stopped me dead in my tracks. I'd just finished a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital, and all I wanted was to surprise my wife, Amelia, by helping her with her new vegetable garden. But that dreaded notice, changed everything. My hands trembled as I read the words, "Immediate action required," stamped across the top in stark black letters. I had heard whispers, unsettling stories about Barbara, our HOA president, from other neighbors. She'd only moved in 6 months ago, yet somehow she'd weaseled her way into being elected president within weeks. The way she'd written our address on the violation notice, pressing so hard the pen nearly ripped through the paper, told me everything I needed to know about her personality: controlling, aggressive, and utterly ruthless. Unapproved landscaping modifications detected in backyard space. The notice declared, my stomach clenching with each word. Immediate removal required. All garden installations must undergo proper HOA review process. Barbara's signature sprawled across the bottom, like she was signing a royal decree, not a petty HOA violation. But it was the final line that sent a shiver of ice down my spine. Security will conduct regular inspections to ensure compliance. Security inspections for a vegetable garden? Since when did our quiet, suburban community in Maple Creek need armed guards patrolling our backyards? Amelia and I had moved here just 3 months prior, drawn by the promise of friendly neighbors and peaceful streets. Mrs. Peterson next door had even welcomed us with a plate of warm, homemade chocolate chip cookies. Now, this. I immediately pulled out my phone, snapping pictures of both sides of the notice. Something about the wording felt off. It was trying too hard, straining to sound official. Being the son of a police chief, I'd learned a thing or two about authority, real and fake. And my gut screamed that this was the latter. Dad always said, "Document everything, son, just in case." Inside, I found Amelia humming softly in the kitchen, soil still clinging to her fingertips from tending our small, meticulously planned garden. Her radiant smile faltered as I handed her the notice. "But, we checked the HOA guidelines," she said, her voice laced with confusion, pulling up the community website on her tablet. "Right here, Article 7. Vegetable gardens permitted in backyard spaces with proper drainage." She highlighted the relevant sections, her environmental lawyer instincts kicking in, sharp and precise. We'd done everything by the book. Installed proper drainage, kept the garden a modest size, no more than 10 feet by 15 feet, even used raised beds of the recommended height, a mere 18 inches. The fledgling tomato plants were barely visible from any angle outside our yard. The doorbell rang, a jarring sound that made us both jump. Through the peephole, I saw Barbara herself, tapping her foot impatiently on our welcome mat. She was dressed in a crisp, white pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, a tablet clutched in her perfectly manicured hands like a weapon. "I wanted to make sure you received my notice," she announced, her voice dripping with condescension when I opened the door. She didn't even bother with a greeting, her eyes darting past me. trying to get a glimpse inside our house. The board has received complaints about your agricultural activities. Would you mind showing me these complaints? I asked, my voice deliberately calm, remembering Dad's advice about staying professional, even in tense situations. And could you clarify which specific HOA guidelines we've violated? Barbara's face tightened, her smile becoming a thin, cruel line. Our new security team will be documenting all violations, starting tomorrow. I suggest you comply quickly to avoid complications. She turned on her heel, a dismissive gesture, but not before I noticed something peculiar, a logo on her tablet case that looked suspiciously like a police badge. A knot of unease tightened in my chest. As I closed the door, Amelia was already pulling up property maps and local ordinances on her laptop. "Look at this," she whispered, pointing to the HOA board meeting minutes from the previous month. They never voted on hiring any security team. Where is she getting the authority for this? I stared out our kitchen window at the neat rows of vegetables Amelia had lovingly planted. Something bigger was happening here, something sinister. That flimsy, orange notice was just the tip of the iceberg. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over Dad's contact, then hesitated. Was it too soon to involve him? But as I watched Barbara stride down our street, stopping to take photos of other homes with her tablet, I couldn't shake the feeling that our quiet community was on the verge of a terrifying transformation. My morning coffee was interrupted by the sight that confirmed my worst fears. Through the kitchen window, I spotted them. Two men, clad in black polo shirts with HOA security emblazoned on the back, were snapping photos of our vegetable garden. Their movements were different from any HOA inspector I'd ever seen. More aggressive, more purposeful. What really caught my eye, however, were the tactical belts they wore, loaded with what looked suspiciously like real police gear. Amelia was still asleep upstairs when I stepped onto our back porch, my heart pounding in my chest. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I asked, striving to keep my voice steady, despite the growing unease churning in my stomach. The taller one turned, his hand resting on what appeared to be a genuine police-issued taser. His partner continued photographing our tomato plants as if they were evidence at a gruesome crime scene. "We have police authority within this community," the tall one stated, flashing a badge that looked official but vanished too quickly for me to get a good look. "We're documenting ongoing violations under HOA Code 47B. He spoke with the chilling confidence of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. I pulled out my phone and started recording, a move that visibly unnerved them both. "I'd like to see your credentials and documentation of this police authority," I said, recalling the legal rights pamphlet I'd read just last week. The shorter one stepped forward, a menacing look on his face, but his partner held him back. That's when Barbara appeared, as if she'd been lurking in the wings, waiting for her cue. She marched across our lawn, a whirlwind in designer workout gear, waving yet another orange violation notice. "These officers don't answer to residents," she announced, clearly relishing the drama. "They report directly to the HOA Executive Board, which means they report to me." I noticed our neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, peeking through her curtains. When our eyes met, she quickly disappeared, but not before I saw the raw fear etched on her face. That look sent a shiver of dread down my spine. Later that morning, while reviewing the footage on my phone, I noticed details I'd missed in the heat of the moment. The officers had no name tags. Their badges didn't match any local law enforcement design I'd ever seen. And the equipment on their belts, it looked real, but something was off about the positioning, the way they wore it. I spent my lunch break researching private security regulations in our state. Every legitimate company needed specific licenses and permits, especially if they were carrying weapons. The HOA newsletter had mentioned hiring enhanced security, but there was no company name, no license numbers, nothing that could be verified. Amelia came downstairs just as I was emailing the state licensing board. "Why are there men with guns taking pictures of our garden?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. I showed her the footage from that morning, and her face went pale. "Those aren't regular security guards," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I used to work at a security company, remember? Their gear is all wrong." We watched, hearts pounding, through our windows as the officers moved down the street, stopping at each house with meticulous precision. They spent extra time at the homes of residents who dared to speak up at recent HOA meetings. The Rodriguez family, who'd complained about discriminatory enforcement of noise regulations. The Smiths, who'd questioned the new security fee on their monthly statement. That evening, I created a private group chat with trusted neighbors. Messages started pouring in immediately. The security team had been entering backyards without permission. They'd been photographing children playing. They'd even threatened to detain someone for washing their car in their own driveway. As I compiled everyone's stories and evidence, my phone buzzed with a text from Barbara herself. "Your continued surveillance of our security team is a violation of HOA policy. Expect enforcement action tomorrow." The threat was clear, but she'd made a crucial mistake. In trying to intimidate us, she'd confirmed our worst suspicions. These men weren't real police officers at all. I looked at Amelia, who was already pulling up the state's laws about impersonating law enforcement. "We need to be really careful," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "If they're willing to pretend to be cops, who knows what else they're willing to do?" The growing stack of evidence on our kitchen table suggested we'd only scratched the surface of what was really going on in our once peaceful neighborhood. My phone buzzed during a crucial work meeting, Amelia's name flashing on the screen. She never calls during work hours. A knot of dread formed in my stomach. Something was terribly wrong. I stepped out, my hands already slick with sweat, as I answered. "They're in our backyard," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling so violently I could barely understand her. "3 of them. They jumped our fence while I was picking tomatoes." I heard male voices in the background, angry and demanding. My wife's breathing grew faster, more ragged through the phone. I could hear the heavy thud of boots on our wooden deck. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Exit the garden now," a voice boomed, trying to sound official. But there was a distinct tremor of uncertainty beneath the bravado. "We have authorization to remove you by force." "I'm not leaving my own property," Amelia said firmly, but I could hear the fear tightening her voice. "Show me your real police badges, or leave, now." The sound of a radio crackling made my stomach drop. "Unit 2, subject is non-compliant, requesting K-9 backup at 1242 Maple Drive." I was already sprinting to my car, my tie whipping in the wind, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Amelia, I'm on my way. Don't move. Call 911 right now. These aren't real cops." Through the phone, I heard Barbara's shrill voice cutting through the air like a shard of glass. "Mrs. Williams, your garden is in direct violation of HOA Aesthetic Guidelines, Section 4.3. My security team has full authority to remove unauthorized plantings and trespassers." "Trespassers?" Amelia's voice rose in disbelief, a mixture of anger and terror. "I live here, and those tomato plants are in our backyard." I put the phone on speaker as I sped home, breaking every speed limit, ignoring the angry honks of other drivers. Amelia kept the line open, and each sound sent a fresh wave of panic through me. The click of a weapon being unfastened, heavy footsteps approaching, Barbara's smug voice listing violations with chilling detachment. "Look what I found," one of the security men said, his voice laced with a disturbing glee. "Hispanic-style peppers, definitely not approved vegetation." "They're jalapenos," Amelia shouted, her voice cracking with outrage. "Since when do vegetables have ethnic restrictions?" I heard our garden gate creak, the one I'd installed just last weekend, a symbol of our hopes for a peaceful life. More boots on gravel, someone yanking at plants, the sickening sound of stems snapping. "Stop touching our property!" Amelia yelled, her voice raw with desperation. "My husband's already called the real police." Barbara's laugh, cold and cruel, sent chills down my spine. "Dear, we are the police in this community. The HOA charter gives us full authority. Now step aside, or my men will remove you." The sound of a dog barking in the distance, a deep, guttural growl, made my blood run cold. They were really bringing in K-9 units for a vegetable garden dispute? I swerved aggressively, cutting off a minivan, drawing a furious blast of its horn. 5 more minutes. Just 5 more minutes. "This is what happens when you ignore warnings, Mrs. Williams," Barbara said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "First, the unapproved plants, then the unauthorized garden stakes, and now, resisting HOA security. You people need to learn respect for authority." "You people?" Sarah's voice was quiet, but I had it, a steely strength I never knew before, and now I heard her phone camera clicking. "Please say that again, Barbara. I'm recording everything." The sound of scrambling feet, Barbara's sharp intake of breath. "Confiscate that phone. It's against HOA policy to record security operations." I heard Amelia scream as someone grabbed at her. The phone clattered to the ground, but the connection remained, a lifeline to the unfolding horror. Through the speaker, I heard the growing rumble of a large dog's growl, getting closer, closer. "Barbara Thompson," Amelia shouted, her voice strained but defiant. "If that dog touches me, you'll be in handcuffs before sunset." I was 2 blocks away when I heard the sirens, but they weren't coming from the direction of the local police station. A black SUV with high K-9 unit markings screeched to a halt in front of our house. The fake police force was escalating, but they had no idea they were about to meet a real chief of police. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. I'd seen power-hungry HOA boards before, but this was something else entirely, something far more sinister. As I turned onto our street, I saw the crowd gathering, neighbors with phones raised, recording everything. Barbara's security team had finally gone too far, and now everyone would see exactly who they really were. My tires screeched as I pulled into our driveway, and what I saw made my heart stop. Amelia was backed against our front door, her gardening gloves still on, dirt smudged on her cheek. 3 men, clad in tactical gear, had formed a menacing half-circle around her, while Barbara stood off to the side, scribbling furiously on a clipboard. But what really made my hand shake, what sent a jolt of pure terror through me, was the German Shepherd, pulling hard against its leash, teeth bared, its eyes fixed on Amelia with predatory intensity. The handler, a kid who looked barely old enough to drink, was struggling to control the animal. These weren't just rent-a-cops playing dress-up anymore. This was dangerous. "Step back inside your vehicle, sir," one of the security officers barked, trying to sound official, his hand resting on what looked like a real police belt. But something was off about his badge. I'd grown up around real police equipment, thanks to Dad, and this wasn't it. Barbara's face lit up with that familiar, smug smile when she saw me. "Perfect timing. Your wife has been interfering with official HOA security operations." She waved her clipboard like it was some kind of royal decree. "We have documented 17 violations, including aggressive behavior toward our officers. I took out my phone and started recording, my own hands trembling. Barbara's smile faltered, just for a split second. Putting unauthorized recordings on social media is against HOA guidelines, she snapped, but I could hear the tremor of worry in her voice. Funny thing about those guidelines, I said, keeping my voice steady, channeling Dad's calm authority. I've read them cover to cover. Nowhere does it mention a private police force or K-9 units. The youngest officer shifted uncomfortably, his hand dropping from his belt. Amelia caught my eye, and I gave her a slight nod. She'd been recording too, her phone partially hidden by her gardening apron. We'd talked about this possibility after the first time these thugs showed up, and now our security cameras were catching everything from 3 different angles. "This is your final warning," Barbara declared, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "Remove the unauthorized vegetables immediately, or we'll be forced to take additional enforcement action," the German Shepherd barked, a sharp, menacing sound that made Amelia jump. That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil. The dog's vest said, "Police K-9," a federal offense if they weren't actual law enforcement. I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head, listing all the laws they were breaking. "Barbara," I said calmly, pulling up the state police department's website on my phone, "did you know that impersonating law enforcement officers is a felony? Those uniforms, that dog's vest, those fake badges, each one is a separate charge." The security team started exchanging nervous glances. The dog handler's grip on the leash tightened, his knuckles turning white. Barbara's face flushed red, but she kept writing on her clipboard, as if it was some kind of shield. "We have full authority to enforce HOA regulations," she insisted, but her voice cracked. "The board approved everything." "Really?" I reached into my car and pulled out the folder I'd been meticulously compiling. "Because I have here the minutes from every board meeting for the past year. Nowhere does it mention hiring armed security or approving K-9 units." I turned to the youngest officer. "By the way, what's your certification number for handling that police dog?" The handler's face went pale. The German Shepherd, picking up on his anxiety, started whining. Barbara's pen froze mid-sentence on her clipboard. "Amelia, I called out, keeping my eyes locked on the security team. "Could you grab Dad's card from my wallet? I think he'd be very interested in seeing these gentlemen's law enforcement credentials." That's when Barbara made her fatal mistake. "Detain them both," she shrieked, her clipboard clattering to the ground. "They're threatening HOA personnel." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone, but I managed to type out a quick text to my dad. "Emergency at house. Fake cops threatening Amelia with dog. Please help." I kept my phone low, pretending to check my work schedule, while Barbara ranted about our garden, violating some made-up rule about aesthetic cohesion. The lead security guy kept his hand on the German Shepherd's harness, making sure we could see how eager the dog was to leap forward. Amelia stood her ground, but I could see the terror in her eyes. She'd been bitten by a dog as a kid, and never quite got over that fear. That's exactly what these bullies were counting on. I checked my phone every few seconds, trying not to be obvious. Dad had read my message. 3 dots appeared as he typed. My heart was racing. In 20 years as chief of police, he'd seen every kind of scam and power trip imaginable. But this was personal. Barbara was getting louder, waving some kind of official-looking document in Amelia's face. "As per Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our Enhanced Security Protocols," she started, but I cut her off. "Could you show me where the HOA board approved these protocols?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Just then, I heard it. The faint sound of sirens in the distance. Barbara was too busy reading from her rulebook to notice, but Valm Captain Reynolds' head snapped up. He knew that sound meant trouble. The other two security guys started shifting nervously. "Maybe we should," one of them started to say, but Barbara whirled on him. "Don't you dare back down now. I'm paying you good money to show these people who's in charge." That's when the first real police car rounded the corner, lights flashing. Then another, and another. The look on Barbara's face was priceless, as 5 patrol cars surrounded my house, cutting off any possible escape route. The German Shepherd, sensing the shift in power, sat down and whined. Dad stepped out of the lead car, and I've never been so proud to be his son. He wasn't wearing his usual business suit. He was in full Chief of Police uniform, badge gleaming. He'd clearly been in a meeting when he got my text, but he hadn't wasted a second responding. "Barbara Thompson," he called out, his voice carrying that special tone of authority that only comes from decades of real police work. "I'm Chief Anderson. Would you care to explain why you have unauthorized personnel impersonating law enforcement officers on private property?" Barbara's face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, fear, anger, and finally, panic. She looked at me, then at Dad, then back at me. The pieces clicked together in her head. The security team tried to back away, but Dad's officers had already formed a perimeter. The German Shepherd, proving it had more sense than its handlers, lay down and rolled over, tail wagging at the real police K-9 unit that had just arrived. I can explain everything," Barbara stammered, but Dad held up his hand. "I'm sure you can, ma'am. We'll have plenty of time for that down at the station. Right now, I'm more interested in where these gentlemen got their equipment and credentials." He turned to the fake security team. "Speaking of which, those badges look remarkably similar to official police identification. That's a federal offense, gentlemen." As Dad's officers began taking statements and collecting evidence, neighbors started peeking out of their houses. Some had phones out, recording everything. Barbara's little empire of fear was crumbling, and the whole community was watching it happen. I pulled Amelia close, feeling her finally relax as the real police took control of the situation. "Your dad," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "He didn't just bring backup, he brought justice." The screech of police sirens filled our street, a symphony of justice drowning out the lies and intimidation. As my dad's cruiser pulled up, lights flashing, a beacon of hope in the gathering dusk, Barbara's smirk vanished. The transformation was instantaneous, her face shifting from confident arrogance to sheer, unadulterated terror in a matter of seconds. Dad stepped out, his police uniform catching the afternoon sun, a symbol of real authority, not the fabricated kind Barbara wielded. The fake security team's German Shepherd, sensing the shift in power, suddenly sat, quiet and subdued, as if it recognized a true authority figure had arrived. 20 years as chief of police had given my father a presence, a gravitas that no fake badge could ever hope to match. "I'd like to see your security licenses and K-9 unit certifications," Dad said calmly, his voice carrying across our front yard with the weight of years of experience. The 3 security officers looked at each other, their tough guy act crumbling like a poorly constructed sandcastle. The one holding the dog's leash started backing away, his bravado evaporating. Barbara jumped in, waving a folder of papers with frantic desperation. "We have all the necessary HOA authorizations right here," she said, her voice pitched higher than usual, a telltale sign of her rising panic. "These officers are fully within their rights to enforce our community guidelines." Dad took the folder but didn't open it. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed Barbara something on the screen. "Interesting," he said, his voice laced with a quiet intensity. Because according to state records, there's no licensed security company registered under your HOA's name. And that K-9 unit, the closest authorized police dog training facility, hasn't certified any private security dogs in 2 years. The color drained from Barbara's face, leaving her looking ashen and defeated. The security team leader, a tall man with a buzz cut, who'd been so intimidating moments before, now couldn't seem to look anyone in the eye. 2 real police officers approached him, and I noticed his hand trembling as he tried to keep hold of the dog's leash. "Sir," one of Dad's officers said, his voice firm but respectful, "that's department-issued gear you're wearing. Mind telling me where you got it?" Dad walked over to the security team's car, shining his flashlight through the windows. "Well, what do we have here?" he called out, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. In the back seat were folders, stuffed with photos. Dozens of them. Pictures of families in their backyards, children playing, residents simply living their lives. My stomach churned with a sickening realization of just how long they'd been watching us. All of us. Barbara tried to slip away during the commotion, a desperate attempt to escape the inevitable, but a young officer blocked her path. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but unwavering, "impersonating law enforcement officers is a federal offense, and using an unauthorized K-9 unit to threaten civilians, that's going to require some explaining." The dog, seeming to sense its handler's distress, had gone from aggressive to confused, a stark contrast to the real K-9 unit that had arrived, its handler radiating calm competence. Dad turned to address the growing crowd of neighbors. "If anyone has had encounters with these individuals, we'll need statements," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. Hands shot up across the street. The Rodriguez family from next door stepped forward first, then the Patels from across the street. "They threatened to have my children removed by social services for playing basketball in our driveway," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and relief. As real police officers began taking statements, I watched Barbara sink into the back of a patrol car, still clutching her precious HOA rulebook, a pathetic shield against the reality crashing down around her. The security team was being cuffed, their fake badges and gear confiscated. Their German Shepherd, now revealed as just an untrained dog, used to scare people, was being gently led away by the real K-9 unit officer. Amelia walked over to my dad, giving him a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dad just nodded, but I could see the simmering anger in his eyes as he looked through more of the surveillance photos from the security team's car. A news van pulled up at the end of our street, its arrival marking the beginning of the end for Barbara's charade. She saw it through the patrol car window and finally broke down, crying. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of someone who was finally facing the consequences of their actions, the tears of a bully exposed. Real justice was about to begin, and our peaceful community, once held hostage by fear, would never be the same. As I watched more neighbors coming forward, sharing their stories of harassment and intimidation, I realized this was bigger than just our house or our garden. This was about standing up to bullies who hide behind fake authority and made-up rules, about reclaiming our community from the clutches of fear. The morning after the arrests, Dad called me into his office at the police station. Spread across his massive desk were stacks of papers, HOA financial records, security contracts riddled with inconsistencies, and hundreds of chilling photos taken of our unsuspecting neighbors. My stomach turned as I saw pictures of children playing innocently, families having dinner on their patios, timestamps showing round-the-clock surveillance. It was a blatant, sickening invasion of privacy. "Son, this goes deeper than we thought," Dad said, sliding a document toward me. It was a bank statement showing monthly payments of a staggering $115,000 to a company called Community Guardian Services. The real HOA budget only allowed for a paltry $2,000 in security expenses. Where was the extra money coming from? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We spent hours poring over the records, piecing together the puzzle of Barbara's elaborate scheme. She'd been charging exorbitant special assessment fees to families who received violation notices, lining her pockets with the ill-gotten gains. The more we looked, the worse it got. The Rodriguez family had paid a staggering $3,000 in security deposits after their birthday party incident. The Patels were charged extra maintenance fees for their non-compliant vegetable garden. The fake security team's background checks revealed even more shocking details. None of them had any real law enforcement training. Their leader, Mike Stevens, had been fired from 3 different police departments for excessive force. The K-9 unit wasn't even a trained police dog. It was Stevens's personal pet, a poorly trained animal he used to intimidate and terrorize residents. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. She'd been talking to Mrs. Garcia, who shared videos of the security team rifling through her mailbox last month, a blatant act of intimidation. Other neighbors started sending in evidence, too. Ring doorbell footage capturing their suspicious activities, cell phone videos of their aggressive tactics, written threats from Barbara, each piece of evidence a nail in the coffin of her deceit. Detective Lisa Martinez, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for detail, burst into the office, waving a document triumphantly. "Chief, we've found their training manual." The pages detailed, with chilling precision, how to target specific residents, what times to photograph families, and even included scripts for threatening people who dared to question their authority. Barbara's handwritten notes in the margins made it chillingly clear. This wasn't about security, it was about control, about wielding power for personal gain. The investigation revealed Barbara had a history of abusing power. She'd run similar schemes in 2 other communities before moving to Maple Creek. Both times, she'd vanished just as people started asking uncomfortable questions about missing funds. This time, however, she hadn't counted on messing with a police chief's family. By afternoon, reporters had gathered outside the station, a swarm of cameras and microphones eager for a story. Dad handled the press conference with his usual calm authority, while I helped Detective Martinez organize the overwhelming amount of evidence for the district attorney. That's when we found the encrypted emails, the smoking gun that revealed the true extent of Barbara's depravity. She'd been sharing our neighbors' personal information with outside companies, selling data about their daily routines, their vulnerabilities, for profit. The real HOA board members were shocked, their faces a mixture of disbelief and horror. They'd trusted Barbara to handle the day-to-day operations, completely unaware of the fake security force or the massive amounts of missing money. One board member broke down crying when she realized she'd signed blank checks that Barbara had used to fund her elaborate scheme. As evening approached, more residents came forward, their stories painting a grim picture of life under Barbara's reign of terror. The security team had been demanding cash payments to overlook violations. They'd threatened elderly residents with eviction, photographed teenage girls by the community pool, and followed children walking home from school. Each story hit harder than the last, fueling our determination to see justice served. I sat in Dad's office until midnight, helping sort through the mountain of evidence, the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders. The last document we've found was a draft of Barbara's newest, most audacious plan, installing cameras inside people's homes for proper compliance monitoring. She'd already ordered the equipment, using HOA funds, of course. Just as we were getting ready to leave, Dad's phone rang. It was the FBI. They wanted to take over the case. Barbara's operation wasn't just confined to our community. She had links to similar schemes across 3 states. What had started as a simple HOA power trip had unraveled a nationwide criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable neighborhoods. Looking at the mountain of evidence on Dad's desk, I thought about Amelia and our garden, the Patels tending their vegetables, and all our neighbors who'd lived in fear, their sense of security shattered. Barbara hadn't just broken the law, she'd broken our community's trust. But as I read through more resident statements, I realized something else. By working together, by standing up to her tyranny, our neighborhood had grown stronger than ever. "There's something you need to see," my neighbor Tom whispered, pulling out his phone, his hand trembling slightly. My stomach dropped as I watched shaky footage of Barbara's security team surrounding the Rodriguez family's birthday party last month. In the video, children were crying, their innocent joy shattered as the K-9 units circled their bounce house, while Barbara stood in the background, a satisfied smirk plastered on her face. More neighbors started gathering on our lawn, each bringing their own evidence, their own stories of harassment and intimidation. Mrs. Peterson, an 80-year-old widow, showed us photos of security guards peering through her windows at night, claiming they were checking for unauthorized decorations. Her hands shook as she described being too scared to even water her flowers. The Patels brought out a detailed diary of harassment, daily photographs, fake violation notices, and even threats about their so suspicious vegetable garden. They said growing too many tomatoes could be a code violation, Mr. Patel explained, his voice tight with anger and a hint of disbelief. "We've lived here for 20 years, but last month they started calling our curry cooking a public nuisance." My dad's officers moved through the crowd, taking statements and collecting evidence with quiet efficiency. With each new story, Barbara seemed to physically shrink, her face growing paler, her confident facade crumbling. The security team stood handcuffed by the patrol cars, their fake badges and real weapons laid out on the hood for photos, a stark reminder of their deception. Someone had started a group chat, sharing photos and videos of Barbara's reign of terror. The Jackson family had footage of the security team measuring their grass with rulers at 6 a.m. The Kowalskis shared emails where Barbara threatened to put liens on their house for having a basketball hoop, one that had been there for 15 years. "Look at this," Dad said, showing me a document on his laptop. Barbara had been paying the security team from a secret HOA account, one hidden from the board in yearly audits. The amount made my eyes widen, over $200,000 in just 6 months. No wonder our community pool hadn't been repaired, the playground equipment left to rust. A news van pulled up, attracted by all the patrol cars, the flashing lights a stark contrast to the quiet suburban street. Barbara tried to hide her face, but her distinctive red power suit made her easy to spot. As the reporter started interviewing neighbors, more people drove in from nearby streets. Turns out, Barbara's security team had been harassing people well beyond our HOA's boundaries. The Martinez family, from 2 blocks over, brought security camera footage of the team trying to issue them citations, even though they weren't even part of our HOA. The team had flashed badges and threatened to arrest their teenage son for skateboarding suspiciously. My dad pulled me aside, his face serious. "This goes deeper than we thought," he said quietly. "These guys have warrants in 3 counties for similar scams. They target communities with power-hungry HOA presidents, convince them they need special security, then use that authority to case houses for robberies. As the sun started setting, our street looked like a block party. If block parties had police evidence, technicians, and news reporters. Neighbors who had never spoken before were hugging and crying together, a sense of shared relief washing over the community. Amelia brought out cold drinks for everyone, and the Rodriguez kids were finally able to finish their interrupted birthday party. This time with real police officers singing along. Barbara sat alone in the back of a patrol car, watching as her carefully constructed kingdom crumbled around her. Her phone kept buzzing, probably the real HOA board members, seeing themselves on the evening news, their reputations tarnished by association. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and investigations, a long and arduous process, but tonight, for the first time in years, our neighborhood felt like a real community again. Looking around at all the smiling faces, the shared stories, the sense of unity, I realized Barbara's biggest crime wasn't the fraud or the fake security force. It was stealing our community's trust in each other. As Dad always said, real security doesn't come from badges and uniforms. It comes from neighbors who look out for each other. My hands shook as I watched the real police officers put handcuffs on Barbara. Her face, usually a mask of angry red, turned ghost white when they read her rights. The fake security team tried to run, a last-ditch effort to escape justice, but Dad's officers had already blocked every exit from our neighborhood. One of them even tried to hide in Mrs. Peterson's rose bushes. That didn't end well for anyone, especially the Roses. The next morning, our street was packed with news vans, a media circus descending upon our once quiet community. Reporters couldn't believe that an HOA president had created her own illegal police force. My phone kept buzzing with messages from friends, sharing links to the story. Local HOA president arrested for running fake police operation was trending on every local news website. Dad called a community meeting at the police station. One by one, our neighbors stood up to tell their stories, their voices filled with a mixture of anger, relief, and a newfound sense of empowerment. The Rodriguez family showed videos of the fake officers threatening their kids for playing basketball after 6 p.m. The Patels shared photos of the security team writing fake tickets for their non-regulation mailbox height. Each story made the charges against Barbara more serious, more damning. But the biggest shock came when the police forensic accountant presented his findings. Barbara hadn't just hired illegal security, she'd stolen over $200,000 from our HOA funds to pay for her private army. The money that should have gone to fixing the community pool and maintaining the playground had instead bought tactical gear and that poor, mistreated German shepherd. Speaking of the dog, we all got a little misty-eyed when the real K-9 unit officer told us how they'd rescued him. He'd been mistreated and poorly trained. Now, he was going to a special program to be rehabilitated and maybe, just maybe, become a real police dog someday. Dad let me visit him at the training center last week. He's already so much happier, his tail wagging with a newfound joy. The district attorney came to our next HOA meeting, a stark contrast to the tense, fear-filled gatherings of the past. She explained all the charges Barbara and her fake officers were facing: impersonating law enforcement, fraud, theft, intimidation, and civil rights violations. Some of the neighbors gasped when she said Barbara could face up to 15 years in prison. I caught myself feeling a flicker of pity for her until I remembered how she'd made Amelia cry, how she'd terrorized our neighbors. Then, something amazing happened. People started sharing their old violation notices, hundreds of them, a paper trail of Barbara's tyranny. We spread them out on tables in the community center, and a pattern emerged, clear and undeniable. Barbara had targeted specific families more than others, especially people of color and anyone who'd ever dared to question her authority. The DA's eyes lit up when she saw this evidence of discrimination, adding another layer to the already mounting charges. The local newspaper ran a big story about how communities can protect themselves from HOA abuse. They interviewed Dad about the warning signs of fake security forces. Amelia got quoted about the importance of standing up to bullies, no matter what titles they give themselves. The reporter even mentioned our vegetable garden, the one that started this whole mess, as an example of reasonable homeowner rights. Last night, we had our first HOA board election since Barbara's arrest. The meeting room was packed, overflowing with residents. Even people who'd never come before showed up to vote, their voices eager to be heard. No one talked about lawn height regulations or mailbox colors. Instead, everyone discussed ideas for community improvements, for ways to make our neighborhood more welcoming, more inclusive. The new board's first vote was to create a Residents' Bill of Rights. No more surprise inspections, no more harassment, no more fake security forces. As I watched my neighbors sign the document, their signatures a symbol of our collective resolve, I noticed that something had changed. People weren't afraid anymore. They were talking to each other, laughing, making plans for block parties and community projects. Barbara's lawyer tried to cut a deal, but the evidence was too strong, the community's outrage too palpable. The DA said our community had set an example for the whole state. New laws were being proposed to prevent HOA overreach and protect homeowners' rights. Amelia got invited to testify at the state capitol about our experience, her voice strong and clear as she spoke truth to power. As we left the courthouse after Barbara's plea hearing, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "You know what the best kind of justice is?" he asked, his voice filled with a quiet pride. "The kind that brings people together instead of pushing them apart." Looking at our neighbors, hugging and crying happy tears on the courthouse steps, I couldn't agree more. The bonds of community, forged in the crucible of shared adversity, were stronger than ever. The moving trucks came for Barbara early on a misty Monday morning. I watched from our front porch as she supervised the loading of her precious lawn ornaments, the same ones she'd used to write up countless violations against other residents. Her face had aged 10 years since her arrest, and her signature "I'm in charge" stance had wilted into something smaller, more defeated. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former HOA president pleads guilty in private security scandal. The story had caught national attention, leading to investigations of similar HOA abuses across the country. Dad told me he'd received calls from police chiefs in 3 states, asking for advice on handling similar cases. The community garden we'd planted, in place of Barbara's precious ornamental lawn, was bursting with life, a vibrant symbol of our collective resilience. Mrs. Peterson, who once reported her neighbors for ethnic cooking smells, now traded homegrown tomatoes for Mrs. Patel's fragrant curry recipes. The Rodriguez kids, who used to rush inside when security drove by, taught everyone how to grow the best jalapenos, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. My dad stopped by every Sunday, not as Police Chief Anderson anymore, but as a proud father and grandfather-to-be. Amelia's baby bump was just starting to show, and the thought of raising our child in this transformed community filled me with hope. The same neighbors who once lived in fear of each other now brought us baby clothes and parenting advice, their kindness a testament to the healing power of community. The new Homeowners Council met in the community center, where Barbara's wall of shame, once covered in violation notices, had been replaced with photos of neighborhood events. A vibrant collage of shared joy. Amelia, leading her first meeting as council president, introduced a revolutionary idea using our budget for community programs instead of security patrols. Last week, a documentary crew interviewed us about the transformation. They captured footage of our monthly block party, where Officer Rodriguez, a real police officer, played basketball with the kids while parents grilled and shared stories. The producer couldn't believe this was the same community she'd read about in the news, the one that had been terrorized by a fake police force. Barbara's old security office became a community resource center. The gun safes and surveillance equipment were replaced with books, board games, and a coffee station. The only uniforms allowed inside were those worn by our community service volunteers, identifiable by their bright yellow neighbor helper vests. Yesterday, I found an envelope in our mailbox. Inside was a letter from Barbara's daughter, who had moved her mother to a smaller house in another state. "Mom's starting therapy," she wrote. "Watching your community heal helped her realize she needs to heal too." Attached was a photo of Barbara at her new home, smiling genuinely for the first time in years as she worked in her own small garden. Standing here now, watching new families move into our neighborhood, I think about how close we came to losing everything good about community living. Amelia squeezes my hand as we watch kids from every background playing freely in their front yards, no security cars in sight. The only sirens we hear nowadays are from the ice cream truck, and the only person checking on homes is Mrs. Patel, delivering her famous homemade naan to new neighbors. Our story made the cover of Community Living magazine this month. The headline read, "From Fear to Family: How One Neighborhood Overthrew Tyranny and Found True Security in Unity." But the real story isn't in the magazine. It's in the sound of laughter from the community garden, the smell of multicultural potluck dinners, and the sight of neighbors helping neighbors, no badges required. Dad says it best when new residents ask about our security system. The best security isn't in cameras or guards. It's in knowing and caring about your neighbors. As I watched the sun set over our transformed community, casting a warm, golden glow over the homes and gardens, I realized Barbara's biggest fear had come true. She had lost control. But in losing control, we all found something much more valuable: the freedom to be neighbors, in the truest sense of the word. The freedom to connect, to share, to support each other, without fear or intimidation. We had learned that true security comes not from force, but from unity, not from surveillance, but from trust, not from fear, but from love. Valuable lesson. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about the true meaning of community and security. It highlights that genuine safety and well-being don't come from oppressive rules, constant surveillance, or fear-mongering. Instead, they are built on trust, mutual respect, open communication, and a willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever experienced anything similar in your own community? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. And if you found this story inspiring, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Let's build a community of informed and empowered citizens together.